A lot of cybersecurity coverage focuses on the latest breach or vulnerability, but each week there are also stories that hint at a little something bigger. And that's what we have this week, showing shifts in how systems work, how attackers operate, and where some of our assumptions maybe are a little outdated. So, we're going to look at a few of these headlines from the past week and ask a few broader questions. I'm Sean McMillan, community manager here at Bishop Fox, and this week I'm joined by David Newman, COO of Xcelligence, along with Shad Malloy, managing senior consultant, and Richard Brown, senior managing operator, both with Bishop Fox. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Nice to be with
Thanks
you.
for having us.
And let's start this week with developer environments. Uh, from Dark Reading, they reported this week on vulnerabilities in Anthropic's Claude code that could allow attackers to compromise developer machines through malicious prompts or manipulated repositories. These these coding tools can read repositories and sometimes execute commands locally, often with developers' credential. So when we think about AI agents operating inside these developer environments, how do you think about the level of trust those systems do have and maybe should have?
Sure. I mean, I can kick it off if nobody. We do quite a bit of like just general risk modeling. Like everybody does risk modeling in their real life as soon as you walk across the street, and then got to run that risk in your head. So I believe the Maestro framework is the new one for thinking about risks for agents mostly. And the way I like to think about it is least autonomy. If you have an agent that can do anything, and I, as a bad guy, have access to your GitHub repo, kind of that what boils down from the checkpoints research is, they put a bunch of prompts in a repo, and if you could get it to read bad things, the outcome will be bad.
Yeah.
Um, but if you limit the autonomy of that agent, where you're like, no, you can't write to my file system. You can give me advice, but you can't like delete my code branch. I think that's a great way of limiting risk around those the agentic models is giving things the minimum amount of autonomy, which is really just an extension of least user privilege that we've done
Yeah.
forever. Would I trust a contractor that I'm paying by the hour with this access? And if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't give an agent that access either. So
I agree with Shad. So yes, this is a vulnerability, an exploitable vulnerability that happens in code every single day, and we discover it, we fix it, those kinds of things. I think AI coding tools are getting a lot of attention because they're for all due intent, they're relatively new to some of these environments, and so if we don't take the time to design them correctly on what they're able to do and what they can access, we should anticipate this. So I don't know that we need new principles or we need new things. We just need to think about how we want this thing to access. There was a recent article about OpenClaw this week too, where it was full access to a system, allowed to delete a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
User couldn't stop it. That's an example of just poor design and allowing something to anything, whether it's a user, it's an API, whatever the case may be, to have access where they shouldn't. So I don't look at this as some really big serious development. I don't think we need new processes or capabilities or approaches to do these things. I think if we follow some basic disciplines, we'll get through this and be able to use these tools and these capabilities, albeit somewhat new, to positive effect.
Yeah. To just round it out, no argument here. 100% agree. I equate this back to when you see the command line installs of things, and it's like, just run this curl command and pipe it to bash, right? You don't know what's going on in the background all the time. And so many of these types of things happen because people just blindly install things or blindly run things and let the autonomy of AI do its thing and just say yes and just check the boxes. Whereas if they understood what was doing, maybe it'd be a little better for everyone. So.
And even just to be contrary to myself, I do think at some point we'll probably see Git command lines or something where we can scan through repos and be like, tell me things that like now we can look for just malicious code, but tell me things that look like malicious prompts. I think we'll start seeing tooling around that. I think we're just, we're on the bleeding edge now where the attackers have the advantage, and give it 6 months, and the defenders will have access to the same code bases, and you'll start seeing better defenses come around those also.
There's an interface design here. It's not just a tool, right? How we're designing what you prompt. There's a guy that was a researcher at Akamai. We were doing a briefing at the same place, and he was talking about exploitation. It was like, hey, give me credential or give me something I'm not supposed to have. And the agent would just come back, sorry, can't do that, and do whatever. Then it would ask it in Spanish and it would give it back, right? And so we're still learning how some of these things behave as well. If I was to say that there was, to contradict myself, if I was to say we were going to adjust something, it would be a more aggressive cycle on how we're learning how the behaviors are happening, so we can integrate those in. Some might be good behaviors, but we certainly don't want bad behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. We also have from the Hacker News, open source CyberStrike AI deployed in AI-driven FortiGate attacks across 55 countries. So basically, threat actors use this open source platform called CyberStrike AI to automate all these attacks against Fortinet appliances. And this is that kind of automated scanning and exploitation that kind of asks how do we change the way we think about defending internet-facing systems in the face of something like this?
Yeah. No, I will say I'm not a fan of saying that the tool is the problem. Right? We've seen this before with Metasploit. We've seen this with Sliver, where threat
Yeah.
actors use legitimate tools to do these nefarious things, and now the tool gets the bad name as if
Yeah.
that's what it's for. So I figure, in my opinion, it'd be more so of like, why the defenders aren't using this on themselves? Why are they not staying abreast of the tools and using them against their own attack surface to see what's actually out there and they're exposed to? And that's one of the things I think this helps with, is knowing, okay, if threat actors are using this tool to mass exploit all these systems, maybe it's something I should run with, caveats, but something I should look into
Yeah.
running on my own systems to know what I'm exposed to for this.
There was Anthropic did a good job, was a couple months ago, talking about how Claude was used to launch an attack. And so if we were drawing it on a board geometrically, right, we draw a triangle, right? Most of the action was happening down here with agents. At the top, there were fewer human beings just controlling a larger attack very systematically. And the controls where key points were coming back to the human beings. That was the basic gist of it. But if you looked at it, if you step back, it was a basic kill chain kind of approach, not a new thing, just a new method, right? And I was in the military for a long time. We used to say it's not the weapon you sling, it's how you sling it that makes you lethal. And so we need to think about these things in really creative ways. I'm very bullish on considering new methods on the defense side, right? And so if attackers are going to start taking that with mass and velocity to use these tools like that, we probably need to think along the same lines. No easy buttons here anywhere, but when I think about the uh, uh, the amount of time or the methods or pre-approved actions that maybe sometimes we use, how can we accelerate our own velocity on the defense side and think about those? So um, I agree with Richard. It's not about the tool. It's about thinking about how we're going to use them differently. So, but I am very, very bullish on using these as greater defense capabilities. We just need to think about it differently.
Yeah, kind of to capstone theirs. I think it's really just we're just going to see an acceleration in the cycle. Like, let's say now it takes Richard's team, 5 months to take some patch that got released, diff it create the exploit code, publish everything, and that goes an hour. It's going down to a month. So I think we're just going to see an and that cuts both ways, right? Like we're going to see attackers doing that. We're going to see defenders doing that. So it's not the great time to be old and slow like me. Like it's we're going to be out on the bleeding edge for a while here.
Yeah.
The other thing that I continue to hear is it's just the kind of cross explanation between what we're, AI agentics and automation. Agents can do automation, right? But automation has been around for a long, long time. So it's not so much about automation or defeating automation or protecting against automation. And again, it goes back to what is the agent doing? What is the agent's intent? I wonder sometimes with now the availability to create MCP servers and your own agents, the scale at which these things are going to exist. I do think in terms of what's the life cycle of an agent? How do you maintain these things? Pretty soon an organization may have millions of agents doing many, many activities. And so we already throw a lot of telemetry off of APIs and infrastructure and applications and those kinds of things. So what happens when these are, and let's look forward to when agents create agents, right? So we just get this, like the old shampoo commercial, right? Tell two friends, I'll tell two friends. You guys are too young to remember.
I remember that one.
I remember that one,
It's been a while since I needed it, but I remember it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, that's how Claude keeps innovating their own systems, is they're using their own agent to build their own agent. So definitely, I think the barrier to entry on all the teams, defense and attack, has dwindled very well. In a good way, I should say. That before you had to know the complexities and outs of things to be able to contribute to the industry. And now that barrier, I may not know about reversing a whole lot, but I know about exploitation. So if I can get that first half done for me, I can take this function and know how I can reach from the outside and exploit it. I think that, like you say, having agents that do those detailed things help me speed up my own investigations.
Yeah. We also this week had from CNET, a hacker threat is hiding in your car's tire pressure system. This is some research from IMDA Networks Institute showing that signals from the tire pressure monitoring systems, sensors installed in most cars since 2008, can be picked up and tracked with just some basic radio receiver equipment. So theoretically, someone could follow a car without ever seeing its license plate. When we see systems like this, I know this seems like a one-off, but this was clearly designed for one thing, for vehicle safety, and security was definitely in this case an afterthought. How do we think about long life cycle of something like this that you can't support forever? But how do we think about that life cycle today?
You bring up a great point, right? And this thing was designed for safety, right? What was it designed to do, right? And how does it do that? This is going to be a problem not only for obviously tires or automobiles, but any kind of autonomy at all. And it's just everywhere. And it's exploding. And so we have to think about what we're designing for in doing that. With respect to the life cycle, that becomes really difficult. I just had my car serviced this weekend and they said, hey, we got the software update. And I was like, okay, great. And do you want us to do it? And I was like, was it a safety thing? And they're like, well, I was like, whatever, go ahead. And then I got a thing in the mail that said, it had to do with the car's emission system and it wasn't calibrated right and all that stuff. The fact that software is doing that stuff, I'm an old guy, so I'm used to like just getting dirty and getting under the hood. I don't even look under the hood of my car anymore because I don't know what to do with it. But we don't even understand what telemetry is throwing off. And I think that would be a good place. And God forbid we buy more tools. And I don't know what you would do around a tire sensor anyway, just put something around your tire or some kind of shield. But I don't think that there's a good answer for sustainment when something is out in something, especially like an OEM kind of thing. I think we have to do a better job at thinking about how we're going to integrate. And there is a lot of attention on that right now in the industry. And as we just saw that we're seeing, Thank goodness for, researchers like Richard, and they're looking at these things too. So I think we got to get those communities better, closer together as well. Because again, what do you value? Well, I'm an engineer who makes widgets. Okay. What do you make those widgets for? Great. Well, what do those widgets do? Oh, well, they do this and they spit off this kind of information. Okay, well, great. Let's get them together with the Richards of the world and others and maybe design a better widget. That's pretty technical, right? Widget.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where I come in for you guys. Yeah.
The buzzwords. I love it. I love it.
So I think about this in the same way as like everyone carries a cell phone in their pocket. I don't know who turns off their Wi-Fi. I don't. But like since
Yeah.
my phone is constantly pinging out for all of the APs, the access
Yeah.
points that I've talked to in my life. Not that I would have ever done this, but you can sit at a coffee shop and you can track people that come in and be like, well, I know that they connect to these 7 access points because I can see them beaconing out for it. So I could probably plot those on a map and do surveillance. And I think there's similarly that if I was, a bad guy, some government spook, that's what I would be using this tire pressure monitor for, is I would be finding those cars driving by the same areas every time. So I would know, it would give me a data point on how to track them. So, I mean, there's way we could anonymize that. You could have the car's computer role identifiers. I mean, there's a lot of ways. But I think the problem is what David was talking about, where you have to go put some developer somewhere in a headlock and say, you need to, code up an update for your 2008 car. There's zero monetary
Right.
feedback for this. So
Yeah.
at some point economics comes into that, and we can come up with probably some security methods to fix it, but I think it's a bigger than any one group. Like it's bigger than an engineering group. It's bigger than the security group. Like maybe an automotive industry could, push forward with this. So
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned turning off Wi-Fi. Early in my career, I was that super paranoid person, and I used to use if that then this.
Oh yeah.
And when I left my house and got too far away from that cell tower, it would turn off my Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So I was going into the world. Um, Not even just from a security perspective on this, but I really try and make sure my identity is my own, and I try and not, let a lot of companies use my identity for free. And I feel like even this, knowing that I drove by your store 4 or 5 times, and now you can send me targeted ads saying, "Hey, I see you live by a Starbucks. You should come and get coffee." Right?
Yeah.
That's other avenues we can use this for that I think, not necessarily don't have a security inference, but definitely something to think about, like just knowing I was there, even from a business perspective, rather than security one too.
Yeah.
yeah, especially now, I would say like privacy and identity is kind of blending into like everyone, not just us, not just tinfoil hat wearers. Like I think it's much wider in the world now. People have realized what people are monetizing about them and don't always enjoy it. So
There's an old movie, an old Tom Cruise movie called The Minority Report. You guys remember that?
Oh yeah.
absolutely.
And he's walking. He gets his eye replaced, and he's walking through this mall, and it's looking at him, and it's throwing ads at him that are tailored specifically to him. Hey, this is on sale. It's a great deal. I think I'd kind of like that. Give up a little bit of my privacy just to cut a good deal and something I want to buy.
Oh man, yeah.
Okay. And then let's see. Finally, we have HelpNet Security. Recent reporting from HelpNet Security and The Nation suggests identity-based attacks now account for 67% of incidents. So when identity becomes this kind of center of gravity for attacks, how does that change the way you should think about identity systems inside your security architecture? Or does it?
Identity is hard in a lot of organizations, especially big enterprises that grew up or maybe have multiple IDPs doing all these things. That combined with what is an identity today? Is an identity a human? Is it a computer, an API, so on and so forth, an agent, right?
Yeah.
And and the ephemeral nature of some of these things. Now, humans aren't ephemeral, I should say. But as we come in and do that, But let's get clear on the importance of identity, and we just got to get rid of older kind of things. Just why are we still doing passwords? Those kinds of things, and it sounds trivial or cliche. Those things aren't easy. But they also require an enormous amount of hygiene and effort. And we spend all our time on that kind of inertia. We're not spending time on thinking about it differently. I do not think the identity problem is going away. And unfortunately, identity platforms are big, they're expensive, they're sometimes complicated. I would challenge us as a community, a technology community, to rethink it altogether, right? Do we need a giant platform? I love that Richard's example, like, he had protection on where he was being tracked and what he was doing, and, or combined with the Wi-Fi thing. Our identities move too. I mean, yes, we move as human people, but we're just so interconnected here. How should we think about identity full stop and new? But we've been using the same approaches now for decades. And I think that has built a very large risk landscape that obviously is a proving ground for bad guys.
When I was at the government, we did, obviously quite a bit of incident response, but also like a lot of the things we did were around identity because they have multiple classification levels on networks. And a lot of when people kind of were starting to move to zero trust and, more work from home models, we put in an identity threat and response thing where it's like, if Richard logged in from, I'm not sure where he's at, Phoenix today, and, in 3 hours, he's trying to, log in from, a country in the Middle East, it would be like, well, that's not possible. We're just going to immediately block that. And
Yeah.
luckily at the government, you can be a jerk and nobody can really fire you. So I was a jerk. That was my job. I told people no and blocked things. But like, I think there's a lot of good statistics and things around that, but there's, like Dave was saying, there's nothing easy about that. Like those are heavy lift projects. But I'm also a big fan of like phishing resistance 2-factor auth. Like, I think that should just be rolled out everywhere. Let's make the barrier for entry. Let's slow people down and make it harder, for people to log in and even get an initial foothold. So.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think the article was saying there's something like 4 hours from compromise to Active Directory compromise, and it's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, there's really no time from entry to protecting that kind of, besides blocking that entry initially.
Yeah.
So I do think that a lot of times we do cater to employees to make their access easier with respect to, to them being able to do their jobs, obviously. But at some point in time, we do have to say, like, it's going to be complex, it's going to be hard, and you're not going to enjoy it at first, but you'll understand when you're not the reason that we're breached in the future.
By extension, identity is closely related to permissions, right? So if your identity is messed up, not your identity as an individual, but if your identity ecosystem is messed up and you have groups that have wrong people in it or they don't have the right permissions, those things, because we created these permission structures to better manage access. And we do that by giving identities permissions to certain groups. And so should we solve for the identity problem or we solve for some of the management pieces? Talk about new employees, onboarding, offboarding employees, contractors, remote employees only. Um, yeah, I think this is another area to think about things differently as we go forward. Depends on your risk profile too, and what regulated industry you're in. If you're in one of the regulated giants, it becomes even more difficult and expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that that has to do with kind of balancing actual prevention with just assuming that it's going to happen, it's inevitable, and just trying to limit the impact when that does occur?
I think taking into account blast radius and like speed to detection and response.
Yeah.
Like if you assume you're going to be breached and have like robust processes involved, like, if this identity, if Shad loses his account, we can, break glass, push a button, and, it'll at least block his account and stop access in, let's say, 20 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
it might not be the cleanest and easiest thing to recover from, but at least they don't have the 4 hours to get Active Directory compromise,
Right.
just like everything, just make it more difficult, except for me. If I am testing your network, put it
Make
in
it
easy
easy.
mode. But like, if for bad people, make it as difficult as possible.
Make them work.
And just if that setting comes down to where the lady who is going to call and complain because you have to have a 16 character password, or the guy gets mad every time he has to come back from lunch, he has to re-authenticate like that. You have to get buy-in from executives to tell people like look, it is a little bit more difficult, but it's difficult for a reason.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Did you have more?
No, I don't know if Shad remembers this from using the government when we did Common Access Card (PKI), and we deployed that everywhere. We spent enormous amounts of money on planning that, deploying it, sustaining it, getting it all ready. And I remember we got to deploy it at bases in Italy, and they were like, "Yeah, no, we don't let that. We don't like that because it collects biometrics as well, and that is a privacy law here. You can't collect the biometric of a human being." And so it was like, I just had this cartoon of like everybody sitting around with CAC readers and PKI cards, and completely useless. And so um, I say that because many of these problems are big and hairy, you got to be really careful about what you're designing, buying, and then building to. Because if you get to especially if you're a multinational, if you get to a nation where you get these kinds of complexities, then
Yeah.
it's not going to be effective for you. And then you end up having snowflake cases to just build more stuff.
One of
Oh,
my edge cases for fixing that same access cards, I used to just walk around and people would leave their desk, but they didn't want to take their card with them, and I would just collect
yeah.
those cards and
Yeah.
they can come ask me for them. But my low tech fix was, I think I spent like $50 on those retractable lanyards, so they could leave it
Yeah.
plugged in, but when they started from their desk, it would just pull it out. Fine, they loved those. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like we always look for the technical blinky light fix. Sometimes just buy the lanyards.
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
Make it work. Well, that's this week's initial access. If you found this useful, entertaining, or otherwise worth your time, please feel free to share with a colleague. Big thanks to all of my guests today, David, Richard, Shad. Pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great talking to you guys. Thanks so much.
All right, and
Anytime.
we will see you next week.